Like they've done big meta studies on this persistently. Homeschooled kids have better socialized, they're better leaders, they're like better in pretty much every category. And people are like, yeah, but I remember I've engaged with homeschool kids and they have no social skills. And I'm like, okay, try to bring them back to your memory. Do you remember why you thought they had no social skills? Was it that they were unusually well mannered? Was it that they didn't engage in petty social politicking? Was it that they didn't randomly get mad at people who picked on them? Is it that maybe they were socialized by adults instead of children?
Hey, kid, get out of that hamster ball.
Oh, I promised my father I wouldn't.
Oh, boy. Well, you best do what he says, homeschool kid. Well, this is our part of the playground, see? We're gonna duct tape you to the bench.
You mean you would actually duct tape my entire body to a bench? For what purpose?
Okay, have a nice second half of the day, nerdo.
Yeah, why, you shouldn't be such a smart mouth Mr. Know-It-All.
Oh, dear. Enjoying your lunch, nerdo? Ah, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me.
Oh, dude, you don't say that.
About the only homeschool kids I've seen that have persistent problems are the ones from very religious backgrounds where it included denying them access to either common media or denying them the right to date and stuff.
Mother knows it's a scary world out there. Something will go wrong, I swear. Ruffians, thugs, poison, also large bugs, men with pointy teeth.
And then they become like sex freaks.
In canon, they have never met. I don't care. I ship it. I don't care. I know that they are siblings, but I think there's something more. If she were dating that guy, they'd be banging, I'm sure.
Would you like to know more?
Okay, I'll start the episode. Hello, Simone. I'm excited to be here with you today. Today, we are going to have an interesting conversation. It is going to be about education because I was having a conversation recently where I realized how incorrectly a lot of Americans think about education because they confuse the actual choices they have around educating their children. And I would say that all of the choices that we make around educating our children should be categorized into 3 buckets, and you should not confuse these buckets are almost totally interchangeable with each other.
Okay.
And Simone is going to hate the names of one of these buckets, so we'll let her choose a different name. The first bucket is location. The second bucket is medium, but Simone also likes to call it method. So method, I'll say. And the third bucket is curriculum. So let me explain how people make mistakes around these 3 buckets. So I may make a complaint and I may say something as a parent like, isn't it wild that we just sit our kids in a room with what is to them an arbitrary authority figure telling them what's true and what's false, and that they are just expected to memorize these things and then, write them down at the end of like, oh yeah, I just trust the authority figure. That's a good way to relate to information. And then some parents will be like, and they'll see our, online, what is a form of a platform. And they'll be like, well, that's too tech for me. So like, well, I like your high tech stuff. I take my kids to a woods school.
Right. They do outdoor schooling.
A woods school. And I'm like, well, they can take a tablet to the woods. Wait, who's teaching them in the woods? And they're like, well, it's it's basically a normal school in the woods. It's like
an arbitrary authority figure telling them what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
But now they're in the woods. So
and so
good.
The worse is
Yep, that's what I thought. See that? You've got a drum circle in your backyard.
Oh, well, they showed up a few days ago, but I didn't think they were hurting anything.
Yeah, I had a guy in Jackson County. He had a little drum circle in his backyard, turned into a drum circle 4 miles in diameter. You get a few hippies playing drums, and next thing you know, you got yourself a colony.
Oh, dear.
So it's good to understand that changing the location where the education is happening doesn't change either the method or the curriculum. And when you are thinking about things like the method / the medium, as I call it, of education, it is very, very important that you not get confused by the aesthetics of the geography. So an example here is, let's go back to granola mom, right? So we just had the previous conversation.
They're
She goes,
called crunchy moms.
crunchy moms, whatever. She goes, oh no, it's okay. You see, that's not the method that we're using. My child, like the teacher acts more like his friend. And I hear this and I go, that sounds infinitely worse than the previous thing you just told me.
It does.
You are telling me first, that's a much better way. If the teacher has like creepy ideas that they want to incept your child with or world perspectives, it's going to be much easier if they've taken on this interpersonal relation with the child.
This is a cult leader now. Oh, good. So we've gone from arbitrary authoritarian leader who you might hate and whose ideas you might question to a cult leader whose ideas you will certainly not question because they've love bombed you. Yes.
And worse, and I've seen teachers like this when the kids don't love them, they're not that happy with the kid. It's very cult leadery vibes. But then the question is like, also, like, what are you filtering for? Like, what kind of person is like, I want to be friends with a bunch of like middle schoolers or toddlers, and I want that to be like, some heavy filters have been applied by the time you've gotten to that point. And then if they're in the woods with your kid, this is the sub-faction that said, I want to not be near other adults, and for whatever reason, I couldn't get a job in the local public school. Are you really sure that this is what you want? I would remind you that in the United States, 1 in 10 kids, I think it's over 1 in 10 kids, has experienced SA by a teacher. So, you know.
And these are typically public or private school teachers who have had criminal background checks and a lot of other vetting, correct?
Yeah. So don't maybe send your kids into the woods with somebody. Like, have a little.
Well, do so with your eyes wide open, if you need to, if you must.
Oh yeah. Well, so then they're like, no, I'll send my kids into the woods with a book.
Okay.
And I'm like,
no teacher, just a book.
Do you know how quickly CPS is going to be called on you? Like, I love it when parents like have these fantasies and it's clear that they've never actually sent their kids out of the house. 37% of American kids have had CPS called on them. We've had CPS called on us twice. I was in a podcast with another woman who asked me this question, and I was like, because you'll have CPS called on you immediately. And she thought for a second. She goes, oh yeah, actually once I let my kids play outside and within 2 hours the cops were at our house.
What? Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm like, because this isn't the world of our parents' generation. You know, we're under the authoritarian regime. So let's begin to break out and delineate all of the different methods and curriculum and environments that kids can learn within.
Let's.
So, and the potential benefits of each, right? So if I'm going to talk about methods, the core ones are teacher who tells kids what's true and what's false, right? Like the authoritarian model, I guess I'll call it. Second one is friendly model. And the friendly model comes in a number of varieties, but friendly model. The third one is reactive model. This is a teacher who is only there for questions.
Oh, the Mrs. Frizzle.
No, not Mrs. Frizzle. She's an insane. Mrs. Frizzle's always almost getting her class killed.
Faster! Is it just me, or is that a real live Tyrannosaurus Rex behind them?
Correctosaurus, Ralphie. And the T-Rex was the biggest meat eater of all time.
Like, I don't know what you're talking.
No, I think she's a great model of a teacher because she's the kind of teacher who puts students in a situation and presents them with problems and says,
or they could die.
Well, okay, that's the fantasy part of it. But when you look at the practical
where they experience body horror,
if I may,
where they get jizzed on by a fish
yes.
while she is singing a song and dancing in a big device that has human lips, is looking at the kids who have been trapped in fish eggs. This is a horror among horrors, Simone, where the kids say, I guess this is our home now, or we're going to be fertilized.
Whoa! Holy mackerel! The bus just laid eggs, and we're in them!
Look at it this way, Ralphie. As soon as we hatch, this will be home!
A salmon went a courting, he did swim. Salmon went a courting.
There's your answer, Carlos.
What? Is he some sort of car wash?
No! Don't eggs have to be fertilized, and we're gonna be the next generation of salmon!
Get ready to dig in, Liz.
Hey! The bus is burying us alive!
Becoming an egg? Okay. Getting fertilized? Okay. Getting buried in an egg? Not okay.
Class?
Let's see if hatching's all it's cracked up to be.
Wow!
I'm hungry. My yolk sack's history.
Let's find food!
What?
When you take away the fantasy sci-fi element of it, she is the kind of teacher who presents students with problems and questions and then encourages them to find for themselves the truth. And I think that's a method, and I quite like that method in the end. I think it's a great method because she's not their friend. She's not an authority figure. She doesn't answer their questions. She encourages them to find their own answers.
The truth is this method that you're describing right here is a fantasy method that many parents believe. No, it's true. So I actually know the method you're talking about. And a lot of ultra rich parents believe that it's what the way their kids are being educated.
Oh, yeah, but no one actually has the time to do that.
Nobody actually has the time to implement this. And
we kind of do at home.
Trust me, I know people who have started schools that were meant to use this method and were at least half billionaires, and their own school ended up going insane. Like it just doesn't work. It is a fantasy. It is a billionaire.
Why does it not work?
Because either there's two problems. One is it's completely non-scalable. Okay. Completely non-scalable, especially post middle school where kids begin to, develop more autonomy. And then when you actually say, okay, I understand it's unscalable, but let's have like 3 kids in a classroom or 2 kids in a classroom, the teachers just give up after 6 months and go back to some other form of education or become completely passive.
Is that because you need students to be so involved to find their own answers and they typically don't have that kind of initiative?
Yes.
Yeah, like with our son Octavian, our biggest problem with him, and I was just having a parent-teacher conference about this, is if you ask him, like what's this? He's always like, you tell me. Like, I don't care. He just doesn't care. I mean, our other son is very different in that he is actively finding things out on his own and insisting on telling us. I want to tell you something, he keeps saying. But yeah, you're right. Most students it doesn't work for.
Back to the real education model.
Yeah.
The passive education model.
Okay.
The passive education model is I have given my kid a form of curriculum that has them regularly run into problems, and typically there is an authority figure around that they can communicate with. So the passive medium typically works alongside one of the other mediums. So then
if you get stuck, you go to the teacher, right? They're like a tutor who's available on demand to help you. Or
an on-demand tutor. Yeah, often a parent or something like that.
Yeah.
And then the last 2 mediums are books and internet. So those are the realistic mediums that actually work instead of fantasy medium. You have authoritarian, friend, passive, book, computer. And basically these are one new one I'd say, AI. And the AI I generally think is a better passive medium unless the passive medium is the parent, just because it's typically going to be much more on demand and the child is actually learning as they're engaging with it.
More informed, more patient.
No, but they're also learning how to use an AI and how to source questions with AI as questions come to them. So they're as an adult, when they might not have some arbitrary authority they can turn to, they know, oh, this is the AI I use for these types of questions, and they build habits around that are effective at coming to true answers. So these are the various methods of communicating information to the kid. Obviously, our school, the Collins Institute, Parasia, you can check it out, collinsinstitute.org. It's free. Right now, it's mostly in the development stage. We have a bunch of editors. We have like a huge team of editors that are going through it. We have a number of them that are paid to just basically work on it all day, every day, removing anything that's wrong. Because a lot of the initial content was developed with AI, so it's got some mistakes. And so we're basically cleaning all that up, while also getting right now help from anybody who's interested. And people are like, oh, so it's not ready for kids. And no, it is ready for kids. Just part of the way the kids are going to learn is identifying wrong answers and questions and flagging them and identifying mistakes. My wife and I built the Collins Institute, a comprehensive interactive map or skill tree comprising all of human knowledge. The platform is designed to be usable as soon as a student gets comfortable with reading and goes about midway through a PhD in most subjects. However, we built it to cover all human knowledge, meaning it covers a much larger domain than is taught in the traditional school system, ranging from tort law to hanging drywall to the industrial transportation of grain or aquaculture pharmacology. Click on a node to open it. The node will include a description of what knowledge is needed to pass its test, as well as a list of the best places to learn that information. Vote on the sources that were most useful to you by clicking this button. To add an additional source, click this button.
And by the way, to those of you who are in Parisia, adding feedback, adding resources, making yourself available as a tutor, thank you so much. You guys rock.
Yes. So now to the environments. The environments are really, I'd say primarily 2, but maybe you can get more. Or 3 and maybe you can get more.
Okay.
You've got your home.
Okay.
You've got a school. And you've got everything else. By that, what I mean is that can be the woods, that could be a city, that could be one of our kids could, with the Parisia platform, get a tablet and hop on our little floating watercraft and spend the day on the lake right outside the house.
Well, don't you think now among very wealthy families, the concept of world schooling got trendy around 10 years ago and has held steady?
World school. So travel.
World schooling, yeah. Basically, wealthy family travels around the world, does their world tour, brings their kids with them because they want to spend time with their kids. And their kids just do a homeschooling program while on the road, but also while going to museums in Florence and, meeting with families in Egypt.
So
and
the question here is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of these various models? I find it interesting how many people think like nature is like, I don't know, like an educational process. Like we can have an authoritarian teacher, or we can have a kid learning online. It's going to be totally different if they're floating on a river. And it's like, well, maybe, I mean, if that's what the kid wants, but I'm sure they'll find some efficiency drop in doing that eventually, but sure, whatever, that's what you want to do. And they can sit on that with their little tablet and go down lazy river style while studying if they wanted to. But the question is, are they going to learn more efficiently in that environment?
Definitely not.
No. So there's a principle in psychology, and I forget what it's called. Basically, the term I was looking for was context-dependent memory or state-dependent memory. If the learning environment is similar to the recall environment, you'll be about 20% better at recall. So an example of this is if you study for a test in the room, you take the test, you will do about like 20% better or something. And it's also like if you study in a radically different environment, like on an airplane or on a boat or in the woods, and then you are testing in a test room, like an ACT test room, you have like shot yourself in the leg before running a marathon. It's an intentionally like stupid thing to do outside of the just health benefits of being in nature. But at that point, it's like, well, I mean, couldn't the kids just go on a couple hour walk every day? Like we live by the woods. I don't know. Like,
I don't know. The hacks that I used when I was a student to get around that when I was concerned about it was I would wear the same perfume on test day as I did on study days. It helped. I felt it helped, but maybe it was all placebo effect.
Now world schooling. I actually, one of the girls who I dated most seriously other than Simone, she was the best. And so I think this idea that if you put a kid in an environment like that, they're not going to build persistent social ties.
This whole thing about, if I homeschool my kids, they won't be socially well adjusted is the biggest myth. It's your child is going to be worse socially adjusted and have worse habits and pick up worse things if they hang out at a school environment. Period. Well, if they're hanging out around adults.
This weird Lord of the Flies scenario. And it's one of these things, like they've done big meta studies on this persistently. Homeschooled kids have better socialized, they're better leaders, they're like better in pretty much every category. And the question is people are like, yeah, but I remember I've engaged with homeschool kids and they have no social skills. And I'm like, okay, I want you to meditate on those engagements. Try to bring them back to your memory. Do you remember why you thought they had no social skills? Was it that they were unusually well-mannered? Was it that they didn't engage in petty social politicking? Was it that they didn't randomly get mad at people who picked on them? Is it that maybe they were socialized by adults instead of children, and you in child world were confused because you ran into somebody who wasn't socialized in child world and didn't understand that it was you who was poorly socialized?
Hey, kid, get out of that hamster ball.
Oh, I promised my father I wouldn't.
Oh, boy. Well, you best do what he says, homeschool kid. Well, this is our part of the playground, see? We're gonna duct tape you to the bench.
You mean you would actually duct tape my entire body to a bench? For what purpose?
Okay, have a nice second half of the day, nerdo.
Yeah, why, you shouldn't be such a smart mouth, Mr. Know-It-All.
Oh, dear. Enjoying your lunch, nerdo? Ah, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. Oh, dude, you don't say that.
And this is something I've persistently seen when people are talking about, homeschool kids. About the only homeschool kids I've seen that have any sort of persistent problems are the ones from very religious backgrounds where it included denying them access to either common media that everyone else would have access to. So in the modern age, this would be something like denying them Facebook and stuff like that, or denying them the right to date and stuff, and then they become like sex freaks.
Mother knows best. It's a scary world out there. Something will go wrong, I swear. Ruffians, thugs, poison, also large bugs. Men with pointy teeth. Mother will protect you. Darling, here's what I suggest.
And like everybody knows, like it's one of these things why I'm always like when somebody's like, well, I'm going to be like super sexually restrictive of my kid and tell them all this stuff is terrible and tell them, and I'm like, but you do know that like everyone that happens to becomes like a super slut, right? Like I will say as a very sexually active guy in high school, like that was a very easy crowd to target. They were some of the easiest people, the people who had the ultra protective parents. And I don't know like how parents with all the stereotypes. I'm gonna put the South Park clip of Homeschool Girl here.
Hey, isn't that the homeschool kid's sister?
Hi, guys.
Holy cow!
Hey, baby, come see me later, Kate.
What the damn, baby?
Hey, Kyle, wanna go make out?
Rebecca, what the devil are you doing?
I'm having fun, Mark.
You did this to my sister. You made my sister into a slut. I'll kill you. Dude, he's kicking the crap out of Kyle.
Yeah, he's a badass.
I'm not through with you, bitch. Hey, you're pretty cool, Mark.
Yeah, that was real badass how you stood up for your sister. I'd have kicked Kyle's bitch ass too.
You want to go have some cake with me, Mark?
He said he'd hang out with me.
Like, how do they not? I guess it's because they don't watch a media or interact or weren't, like they don't understand the vulnerabilities they're instilling in the kids through doing that, which was, yeah, very, very interesting.
Mother knows best. Take it from your mumsy. All sloppy, but sure clumsy. Gullible, naive, positively grubby.
I love it so much when I'm talking to one of these parents and they're like, oh, yeah, but my kid actually really obeys the rules. And, she's super sweet and she would never, break any of the rules. And I'm like, what? Do you think the girls I was sleeping with who had protective parents told their parents? Are you out of your mind? No, of course that's what you'd think if they were sleeping around. Oh my gosh. For individuals wondering about the functional mechanism that makes sheltered girls so much easier than non-sheltered girls, it's that once you have gotten a shelter girl to kiss you, from that point to PIV intercourse there's very few barriers, because for them the core barrier is the hard line in the sand that the parents have set for them, whereas with non-sheltered individuals they have an escalating barrier based on the seriousness of the intimate act they are engaging with. So with the sheltered kids, really all you're doing is slightly increasing the difficulty of getting the first kiss, but everything after that is dramatically easier. And it's just a really bad idea. What was another one? Different categories. Oh, yes. Yeah. So the world school kids, typically, because I've met a number of them, they end up like super well adjusted, unusually well adjusted. This is also true for military brats.
Well, and I would say even those raised in cults often turn out a lot more well adjusted. The people we've met who came from even extreme cults, we're talking polygamous cults in the jungles of South America, and I'm not changing any details there. Very well adjusted, very normal, cool people. So
yeah, that guy was exceptionally well adjusted. He was really
yeah,
cool.
yes,
It was a cult where they kick out all the young men because the one guy is married to all of the women.
yeah. So this guy had 6 brothers, and they were all throughout the United States because they'd all been kicked out of the family, and they all kind of helped each other after they got kicked out, which is kind of interesting model, really cool.
Yeah, they've apparently they were all pretty
They
successful.
were very successful. Yeah, yeah.
Which is interesting. It's like, well, I mean, I guess the dad has like really good genes. Like that's
Well, and I think there's something to be said for forcing, not well, yes, forcing, but also allowing people to grow up. We do infantilize people egregiously, even adults in the United States these days, just culturally and pervasively, and even systemically and governmentally, we infantilize people across all means. So a cult that artificially kind of removes you from mainstream society and forces you to become an adult is going to give you a distinct advantage.
right. Well, I mean, that sort of forcing is very useful, but then you're not going to stay within your birth culture. But one that is really dangerous that I see a lot of people defaulting more towards is
sheltering.
Well, 2 types of sheltering that are both very damaging to kids.
Mm.
The first, and why it's a terrible idea, is more obvious, which is sheltering from social media. If you do not teach your child to judiciously engage with social media, you are hurting them in 2 core ways. One, they're going to get a social media account when they get out from under your thumb, and they're going to do dumb stuff with it that will be on the internet forever at an age where they're going to be held responsible for that stuff.
Mm.
Do not it's the same thing as like telling a kid they can't date. Like, of course you're going to get the freak scenario after that. It reminds me of earlier today. I was actually thinking about like what cultural group, because I've slept with women from many cultural groups, are typically the best in bed. And when I was thinking, I was like, I hate to, it's got to be Catholic girls. They just have a lot more experience than any other cultural subgroup I'm familiar with.
Father, forgive me, for I have sinned. My sins would best be expressed in a monologue from the made-for-TV movie Sybil.
You're nothing but a little slut.
Don't call me that. I am a Puerto Rican lady, senor.
I'm not a slut! I'm not a slut!
And it's partially because of this protective mindset, right? Like, oh, we'll protect them from learning how to judiciously or anything like that, right? Or learning how to deal with social media judiciously. So I think that's one problem. But then the other problem that you're going to have in dealing with social media is as the school system begins to degrade, we are entering a world where one of the core ways that people check the competence of other people is to see if that person has been validated by people that they know or has been validated by a large group of strangers. And that is done often through social media accounts. So when somebody's deciding to work with us or invest in us or something like that, they're, checking us out on X and seeing, do people who they respect follow us? Do we have X many followers at least? Like, are we socially relevant? And there really just aren't that many other good competence fetters that are broadly accessible and interpretable across communities right now. And so when you ban a kid from this, it's a bit like banning a kid from getting a college degree in the last societal system. It's going to lead to like huge negative externalities for the kid. Do you have thoughts before I go on?
No, I agree. Let's go on to the different
channels. Other problem is, and now we're going to move into the question of the digital realm, right? Like, if the method that the kid is being educated on is digital, is that going to cause problems? And I would note here that what a lot of people don't know is when books were first released, there were lots of panics around this, of people becoming addicted to books and all of the negative psychological effects of books. And when I was talking to a mom about this recently, she was like, well, I mean, even today, my daughter got a little too into fantasy books, and I had to like wean her off those a bit for a period, because she's like, it's not that they were bad books, it's just that she was
reading them to the exclusion of everything else, right?
Not just that, but they were building bad expectations about reality for her, expecting fantasy book boyfriends, expecting fantasy book environments. The world doesn't have dragons, right? So It created a set of bad and for ages. When people today are like, isn't that funny? They thought young girls were getting addicted to reading in the past and going insane. And I was like, well, I mean, it's not that insane. Like, I think it was probably actually happening. It's just today we call that being a little too into fan fiction or something. Like, it still happens. It's just different these days. I was talking to one fairly sheltering mother at one point, bragging about how into writing her daughter was and how she was involved in all of these communities online that wrote. And I was like, huh, are they writing fan fiction? And she's like, yes, that's exactly what they write. And here I am thinking, oh my goodness, you have no idea what your daughter is doing, do you? But the online environment, people are like, well, look at all the research on screen times, look at all how bad screen times are. And my take on screen times is it's a bit like I told somebody, well, living in the Tenderloin in San Francisco is bad for you. And they're like, well, why do you think that? And I'm like, well, every time I go there, there's like people throwing up and they look sick and they're screaming at the wall and they can barely move. And they're like, that's the meth. And I'm like, yeah, but why is it only in the Tenderloin? And they're like, well, because that's where they sell the meth. That's where they do the meth. That's where all the meth is done. It is not the Tenderloin intrinsically. That's where meth is sold. Dopamine loops within online environments is what's causing all of these negative externalities. It's not the environments themselves that intrinsically lead to these externalities. And so, yeah, it's, and then they're like, well, yeah, but you can't tell your kid that they have to go to the Tenderloin to work every day. And I'm like, if it turns out that that's where our entire economy is based, I mean, yeah, you kind of need them to learn how to handle this environment without taking meth. And this creates this whole other scenario. So if people don't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about dopamine loops, okay? So, there is, I'm forgetting the word for this right now, but if you put like a mouse or a rat
Skinner boxes,
yeah, and it pushes a lever and it gets food every time it pushes the lever, it'll push the food when it's hungry. If it gets food sometimes when it pushes the lever, it'll start like pushing the lever repeatedly, right? This is why you get all these gambling like things in video games and online environments these days. And they can create an addiction using your own neurochemical pathways instead of inducing exogenous chemicals. And it can cause all sorts of, and people are like, I don't engage with anything like that online. And I'm like, well, do you use Facebook or Twitter or Instagram? Because those are TikTok, all social Skinner boxes. You are putting the picture out and then you get a variable positive response. And to an adult, that's one thing, but to a kid, kids respond extremely exaggeratedly to social approval. And so that is a huge addiction pathway for kids. And so the parents are like, well, so it is screens that are the problem. I'm like, well, I mean, not really. So if a kid's just like on Wikipedia, right, it's not a problem, right? If I put a kid on YouTube and he's watching Magic School Bus, I am 100% positive, and people are like, no, all shows are bad to some extent. I'm sorry, I'm 100% positive that kid is going to be learning more than he would be with a random adult. And people can be like, no, the adult can be like, but it's like, yeah, but you haven't seen kids around adults, even around you, okay? You can sit down and read them a story you've read to them before, which is like marginal additional utility. You can try to engage them in a conversation. And you'll
like go outside and annotate things. Like your mom, when she was still living, would tell you that you have to go outside and go on a walk with the kids and tell them the name of every single plant, also in Latin. And she had this big vision for how you were going to educate the children. they're not listening to us when we're talking with
Oh yeah,
them about
God,
these
no,
things.
that doesn't work.
No, they're over there climbing a tree. They're over there stepping on a hornet's nest. They are not listening to
this
us. Tell them the
idea that
plant's
you,
names in Latin.
as an adult, can like sit down and monopolize your kid's attention.
Yeah.
Maybe this works with some kids, but it doesn't work with our kids, and I imagine it doesn't work with a lot of other people's kids. If I want my kid to sit down and actually watch something that has any educational value, and let me define educational value here, it uses broad plot narratives. It has human beings with emotions reacting appropriately to various scenarios, and it explains some sort of scientific phenomenon, i.e. magical school bus. Like, this is useful here. And it has an important
Bill Nye the Science Guy. Our kids love Bill Nye.
Yeah, we do Bill Nye. So the old stuff, not since he went woke and crazy. I mean, he was an actor. He wasn't like a smart person. People understand this, right? Parents who are shocked to find out that Bill Nye is just a dumb actor, like with the opinions of any other dumb actor, give off to me the same energy of like a police department who's stuck in a really hard homicide investigation, calling up Steve from Blue's Clues, and then being confused why he can't solve the crime.
Great. We gotta find a paw print, that's the first clue. We put it in a notebook, and now what do? We gotta find another paw print, that's the second clue. We put it in a notebook.
But varied ideas. So one of the things that people miss when they're like, oh, I'm just going to talk with my kids, is the vocabulary that you are going to use when you are trying to communicate with a child is going to be intrinsically limited and less than the vocabulary they're going to engage in a show. So much of the parenting advice I hear is from people who have clearly never interacted extendedly.
100%.
And it's like, that won't work. Like, they're like, let the kids go outside. I'm like, you'll be arrested. They're like, don't show them a show, sit down and talk with your kids. And it's like, kids won't talk with you for more than like 5 minutes. Like, what are you talking about? They'll get annoyed and walk off and go do something else.
Well, what I found really works well is annotation. So yeah, watch TV with them, but watch it with them and talk about it. What are they doing now? What's happening? What do you think they are feeling like right now? What does this mean? And you get really great conversations from that because they're engaged with the media, but they're also excited to talk about it.
But if you prevent your kid from interacting with these types of medium because you're like, well, I don't want my kid to have experience with those Skinner box things, they're gonna experience them eventually. And they're not gonna have any defenses when they do.
Yeah. It's like memes and addictive pathways are not too dissimilar from diseases. It's like introducing smallpox to Indigenous Americans. They have no defenses. So you want to have the kids who grew up around smallpox and, slowly developed, resistance to increasing levels of viral load, I guess. And you don't want the kid who grew up in a bubble and has absolutely no immune system for it.
It reminds me, growing up, I've mentioned I had some friends who like their parents were like, no dating until after college. And I was like, well, do you know how effed those kids were after college? Like, but the point being is that until after college, they were more efficient than I was. Like, they had more time to study than I did. They had less distractions than I did. They were doing better than me. When somebody says, well, we didn't allow a kid any engagement with screen time in an online environment, and look, he did better than the kid who did have access to screen time in an online environment. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I believe you.
Yeah.
At the end of the period where you still could control his access to the online environment.
It's great while it lasts.
Yeah, I do not believe you 5 years post then. And the question is, okay, well, if my kid is accessing these sorts of things, how do I convince him to, play with the Collins Institute instead of go, on a video game or something like that? And I'm like, well, that's the crux of it. Now you realize your core job as a parent. How do you build a moral philosophy for your child? How do you build a system for your child, or when a child is deciding, what do I want from my life? And they're making decisions around that they make the right decision. With our kids, we focus on this concept of, well, you've got to, fix the world. Where fix the world is defined as making the world a better place for future humans. And people are like, oh my God, how dare you give your child expectations? And I'm like, well, that's an insane thing to say. Of course, I would have expectations for my child. Like, the urban monoculture tries to normalize this sentiment because it makes it easier to deconvert children from their birth cultures, because it doesn't have kids with people in the urban monoculture don't have kids, and so it can only survive by taking children from other cultures, and so it doesn't need to motivate practices that are actually useful in terms of child rearing. It just needs to motivate practices that convince anyone that their parents are abusive, because the first step of a cult is to try to break a person from their traditional support network, i.e. their parents and their community and birth culture. So yeah, and I know my kids won't be particularly susceptible to that, and we'll do another episode on why that would be the case. But point here being, you as a parent need to come up with a system for communicating a broad moral framework for your kids. And if what you're thinking right here is, oh, I don't need to worry about that because I take my kids to church every week, I'd say you are so effed. There is no way that kid's going to be a Christian when they grow up. Because I know so many young kids in this generation, these parents who grew up in an environment where most of the people around them were Christian. Okay, so the type of Christianity that they grew up with is different, and the type of sociological context that they grew up in is different. And they're like, oh, I can just copy and paste that iteration of Christianity onto my kids in a world that's like actively hunting them and attempting to brainwash them, and they'll be fine. And I'm like, no, what? No, that's an insane sentiment. You are the shepherd that is leaving your flock with the wolf. Like, what are you thinking? That is not going to work. You come one day and you're like, well, where's little Timmy? And the wolf's wiping the blood off his face because you were a buffoon, and you thought that you were dealing with the same environmental and technological, and might say, I'm talking about cultural, technological context that you grew up in, and you are not. And this is why when so many people are like, oh, I'll just go back to traditions, I'm like, those traditions were developed for contexts in which they were the norm. You know, whether it's, you know, pretty much the only one that wasn't was Judaism. And that's why Judaism is weeping butt right now in terms of fertility rates, in terms of deconversion rates, in terms of, because they, for hundreds of years, have been a minority in where they lived. But right now, if you are a Baptist, you know, it's likely that most of the people around you growing up were Baptists. If you were a Mormon, it's likely that most of the people around you growing up were Mormon. If you were, you know, a Muslim, it's likely that, well, depends on where you live, but most of the people growing up around you were Muslim. And so the tools that defended you won't defend your kids, okay? The weapon that you need to bring to school, let's put it this way, when everyone else at the school is a sheep and not a wolf, is very different, okay? Your kids need swords, not little shivs. And they also need to learn to be smart. One of the things I've noticed a lot of like conservative parents, they get so proud that their kids got canceled. And I'm like, no, your kids shouldn't have gotten canceled, you knob. You should have taught them how to defend themselves from being caught out by the Inquisition, okay? They can achieve more if they can stay under the radar until they're willing to use the cancellation to their benefit. You know, getting ostracized by your peers in high school is not a good thing. And you should have taught them that they were the minority and they were the beleaguered group and they were going into a hostile environment. But what are your thoughts, Simone?
I agree. 100%. And you hear often from the parents whose kids are canceled because they turn them into news stories. But I think majority of kids who go through a hostile environment in school and whose parents are doing a good job with annotation do learn that. And we know kids like that. And they're very aware of what's going on, which is great. And I think it really goes to show that if you want to actually protect your culture, you should and absolutely can send your kids through mainstream institutions and actively teach them how to inoculate themselves against toxic culture and habits. So we've covered the environment. We've covered the curriculum.
Yeah, but we haven't covered the, what's the word? I'm like, curriculum. But I'm not going to cover the curriculum because, frankly, there just aren't that many curriculum. People believe there are like more genuine curriculum than there really are. And when I say curriculum, I mean just like any model of teaching kids. Like Wikipedia could be a curriculum, right? Like,
well, I don't know. So what I hear is basically you can go to a Catholic school, you can go to like a traditional Jewish school, you can do what's really popular among conservatives these days is a classical Christian education. And then there is mainstream urban monoculture school.
By the way, I want to roll my eyes harder at a classical Christian education.
Okay, go ahead, rip into it, because that's what's pervasive among people who consider
These
themselves
are like
to be
these
thoughtful
knobs who are
conservatives.
like, I'm gonna have my kids read all the classics, all of these great books, because they think that like things in the past are like intrinsically better sources of knowledge than things today. And it's like, no, cultural systems from the past might be better sources, but things, reading Old Man in the Sea is not going to be as useful use of your kid's time as learning to code, like obviously, or spending time learning AI. And this is a really important thing that people are missing. Where people get information from, like the best medium of communication of information, is changing. When I was growing up, there were many parents who, in educational models, that were like, okay, kids, we got to teach you how to learn. So we're going to teach you the Dewey Decimal System, and we're going to teach you how to use a library. And people of our generation all remember this, and no one has used this ever. But the kids were like, well, I mean, it seems like this internet thing is what I should be focused on. Like, it seems like this is what I should learn how to use really well if I want to be effective in the next era. I should learn how to do Boolean searches. I should learn how to, and how many people I know today still don't know how to do Boolean searches? You know what I mean? Like they were using the key source of information that everyone else had access to was like intrinsic handicaps. And then in this next era, many parents are going into it and they're like, okay, I need to teach my kids how to use the internet wisely to source for information. And I'm like, we're in AI era now. Okay, this is new. If your kids don't know how to use AI, they are effed. And I was mentioning this to the lady I was interviewing, because I was on Deborah's show, and we were talking about this. And she said, well, I think it's unethical the way AI like scrapes other people's images and stuff like that and scrapes other people's work. And I'm like, okay, this is like me saying, I think it's unethical that the Tuskegee experiments happened, therefore I won't give my kids vaccines. Like, regardless of how ethical it is, it's happened, it's done. Your kids are going to be competing. Like if you try to teach your kid how to be a graphic designer and they go out and try to get jobs, they'll be competing against people who know how to use AI.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they want to do their own art by hand, generally now the first way to learn to do something is through AI. And I love it. Like coders are so, but the skill tree that we developed for Parasia starts with, well, learn to code using AI, i.e. learn to give AI prompts that give it back code that you can use. And they're like, well, this will teach you bad habits. And I'm like, it will teach you bad habits if you're learning to code for the world of today. If you're learning to code for the world of tomorrow, maybe not. And also keep in mind that it's the first skill in the programming tree. It's the skill that a lot of people will drop out at. And yet it is the skill that any idiot can figure out, right? And realize that, hey, me that doesn't fully know how to code, I can figure out how to do some basic stuff with AI. And this is true across all fields, art. Like, hey, me, as who's not going to try to become a professional artist, I can figure out how to like make art for title cards, for example, which I do every day, right? Like it doesn't need to be perfect. You're seeing it in this little like, 1/4-inch square. Hold on, I'm gonna have a Octavian come in and say hi.
To sum it all up. Yeah. What? To sum it all up, basically, parents need to stop thinking that switching up one of these things is going to change everything. They have to think about each element of the kid's education, right?
Yes, and they have to use the Collins Institute because it's the only real educational system left. Octavian, what do you think of the Collins Institute?
That I just really, really, really like Starfly and the fact that's right. And I like you guys because Bingo sounds circumflex salary. I don't like tips. It's so yummy.
Wait, you like us?
Yes, because you does. Because you're doing the one Stacy tell you.
Oh, you like us because we are obedient.
Yeah.
Do we do what you tell us?
Yes.
Here, do you want to hold this? And do you like it when we do what you tell us to?
Yeah.
And wait, Octavian, do you like earlier you told me, do you like this world?
Yes.
Do you want to go away or do you like being here?
I like being here.
Okay. Do you want more brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
Do you like mommy? Wait, are you goofy? Can you tell the audience a joke about liking and subscribing?
Why did a ticket cross the road to get to a wire?
Why?
Because it found food that was electronic.
It found electronic food?
Yeah.
Wait a second, that doesn't sound true.
Okay.
Wait, okay, Octavian.
Why did the chicken cross the road? Because he found food that's electronic? Is that really what he said?
He crossed the food to get to a wire because he found food that was electronic.
Because cars were in outer space.
Cars were in outer space? Okay, so here's a question I have.
Well, that's true, isn't it? There is a Tesla still out there somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah, okay, Octavian, listen. I have a question for you. Who do you like best? Do you like Mommy, Daddy, Torsten, or Titan?
Toasty.
I like Toasty too, because he's your brother?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go get the other kids. I love you, Simone.
Can I still
too.
talk?
Pumpkin ravioli with pesto, right? Okay.
When I
Gotcha.
still talk to Mommy.
Yeah, you can talk.
You can talk to me, buddy. I'll interview you. Sound good?
Okay, look, sit
Yeah.
down, and be
Sit
careful.
down and I'm going to interview you. All right, Octavian?
All right.
Where do you learn the most? Do you learn the most at school or from watching shows like Magic School Bus?
At school.
At school? And what do they teach you at school?
They learn me.
They learn you at school? Do you learn things from shows like Bill Nye the Science Guy and Magic School Bus too?
No, not those. Well,
Not
I also
those.
watched the monkey at the baseball play.
Monkey with a baseball?
Yeah, play. It does got it on there. There's no computer to make it. But
Is that what you watch on the computer at school?
Yes. I also have Chromebooks.
Oh.
Those
On
are-
your
those
Chromebooks.
are-
Yeah. You watch the monkey with the baseball thing on your Chromebook at school?
No, but those are still videos of. Oh, there is one at the baseball place.
The baseball place. What else do you do at school to learn?
That's a good question. I'll tell you. I do paper. I draw paper and do everything. I connect the jars and put it in my mailbox.
So you do paperwork at school, is that right?
Yeah.
And do you like doing paperwork, Octavian?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's fortunate. That is very fortunate. Nice.
The microphone is still blocked in.
It's still working because I can still hear you, which is good. What do you want for dinner, Octavian?
I want for dinner is the fakes I was talking about yesterday.
You are like Miranda Priestley, I swear.
I just want the fakes that Stacey does ask you.
The Cheetos that she asked me for?
Yeah, I want the Cheetos.
I gave her all the Cheetos. She has all the Cheetos. There's only healthy food at our house, buddy.
What?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I want Cheetos.
Well, you can have strawberries here. Do you like strawberries?
Yeah, but I don't like those. I really want the things Stacey does have. And if you don't let me have them, then I'll just be to kick you out of this house through the window.
You're going to defenestrate me. Can you say defenestrate?
The fun is right.
Good. So that's what you were threatening. You were going to defenestrate me. If you're going to kick someone out through the window, you're defenestrating them. All right, buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you say that again? Basically, if you don't give me junk food, I will defenestrate you.
Say that.
If you don't give me junk food, I'll defenestrate you.
Good job, buddy. High five through the screen. Yeah.
High five.
Yeah.
High five, Daddy.
Good
High
job.
five, Daddy. Learning to be violent with authority is important.
No, eloquent violence in this house.
Yeah, eloquent violence. You can't let her. Okay, what do you want to say?
Titan, you want to see baby deer tonight?
Seer, say baby deer. Do you see baby deer?
Zip baby deer.
Do you like the baby deer, Titan?
On.
What do you want to say, Titan?
Here, Titan, what do you want to say? Did you see the baby deer? Where'd the baby deer?
Oh, Titan, I love you.
Come here, come
You
here.
just want. It's a microphone, Titan. Can you say microphone, Titan?
Yes, and this baby deer now.
You want to see a baby deer in the
Torsten,
window?
What do you want to say to mommy? Here, what do you want to say to people? Okay, you
It's
just
not
want
headphones, it's a microphone, Titan. Can you say microphone?
Let Torsten play with it for 1 second.
Hey, buddy.
What do you want to say, Torsten?
Look who I have.
I think I like watching TV at Stacy Dance Home.
Oh, really?
Look, you've got the microphone now.
You see them on the screen, lady?
Yeah.
Tell it! Collins Clan!
I can't hear you, Dad.
The world!
I cannot hear you.
All right, I'll come down and make
Rule
dinner.
The world one day?
I can't hear you.
Are you going to rule the world, Octavian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
You're not going to rule the world?
Why can I not hear them?
Because I'm wearing headphones.
Wait, are you going to rule the world, Torsten?
But I need to hear them. I want to see Mom.
I'm right here, Toasty. You want me to come
I
downstairs?
can hear you. I don't know what you're saying. So I'm not going to do anything. Okay?
Whoa, I got you.
Okay, I'll be right down. I'm going to stop recording and come down. I love you. We're going to go downstairs.
A pipe dream.
Okay, hold on.
Created by a delirious woman.
I will be able to hear you once I put these in. Oh, don't do that. Mrs. Grabulux. Well, miss, you're not married yet. Let's be proper about this.
Sorry,
Okay.
I forgot to tell you. I did have some talks with another family, and the goats have arrived, so she is married. But I got you those miniature goats you wanted, so...
No, they were miniature cows that they were looking at. They were going to get miniature cows. But I think there's some kind of local ordinance that prevents us from owning livestock above a certain size. Maybe that's why we're looking for miniature cows, actually. It's a loophole. A toy cow. It's not a cow. Did you know that the oh gosh, what's the, Hannah Needleman, the Needlemans of, gosh, what's it called? The Tradwife Farm.
Oh, the Ballerina Farms?
Ballerina Farms. Thank you. Yeah, the Ballerina Farms family once went camping with their dairy cow because they didn't have anywhere to, I guess they had no one to watch it. And, dairy cows have to be milked quite regularly. So they just took her camping. Had fresh milk.
I guess it's cheaper than hiring somebody to milk your dairy cow.
Honestly, it is so hard to get a babysitter. Can you imagine what it would be like to get a cow sitter? I mean, I get it.
To yank on those tatas.
Those teeth.
That you gotta paying a teen to do that. That's hard if you're in a conservative Mormon community, maybe.
Well, I feel like the modern liability too. Maybe the cow would kick the local teen who you have cow sitting them, and then there would be a lawsuit. So just bring it camping.
Also, probably better for viral videos if you bring the cow.
I think this was before they were vlogging. This was back when she just kept an extensive diary online, blog online.
Mormons do crazy things, like
Mormons are the
putting his
best.
dog on top of the car.
That's not crazy. One of my favorite experiences from childhood was my dad generously let me cling to the rack on the top of our car, and he drove it for a while, and it was magical.
I agree. You are.
Dogs want to stick their head out the window when they're driving in a driver's seat and they're not secured. They want the wind in their face. he was doing the dog a favor. I feel even dog lovers don't understand what dogs want, it seems. What's wrong with these people?
I know, disgusting, aren't they?
Kind of. When I think about the number of people who use their dogs for
masturbating
pleasure, we'll say, yeah.
It's high. It's high in America.
Yeah, it's really high, and it just it really squidges me out, and I.
Although,
like it.
did you know, if you read The Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality, one of the books we'd written, you would know it's one of the only fetishes that has gone down dramatically over time.
Oh, that's nice. Why?
It went from 7% to 5% because fewer, lower percent of Americans lived in a rural environment is the core reason.
Oh, so urban dog owners are less likely to have...
No, so the question wasn't dog. It was
animal. Yeah, animal relations.
Any animal, yeah. And so, just more people were living on farms in the past.
Well, and I think that in that case, we're talking about men penetrating animals when really what I'm grossed out by most.
Are you not grossed out by men penetrating animals?
Well, I'm grossed out by that, but I think what's more pervasive is women having animals, dogs.
Oh yeah, it is weirdly pervasive.
Go down on them. Yeah.
Oof. This is, by the way, our education episode.
No! Cut this out. We haven't started yet. Just start. We're not putting this in. This is the family episode. Start the episode.